Well, people, different decade, another regime change. Bush 2.0 doing Israel's dirty work once again. After working with Israel to force Bashar al-Assad out, they went ahead and installed an Islamic butcher who used to be in ISIS. Yeah, that's called progressiveness right there. You know, the Mossad and CIA created ISIS group, a terror group that did the dirty work of the DICs. And that same Israeli puppet then turned around and started slaughtering minority groups inside Syria. And we all sat there wondering, like, wait a second, I thought they were going to replace the government with something more tolerant, more progressive, you know? Didn't they just accuse Assad of this exact behavior, calling him a dictator, an intolerant tyrant? Yet the person they replaced him with is the least tolerant type of person imaginable, a literal terrorist. Someone willing to slaughter any minority group because, you know, they're all infidels to his religion. Oh, except for Israelis. Yeah, they're apparently off limits for this ISIS jihadi. Yeah, funny how that works. But here's the crazy part. This regime change blueprint has been going on for decades. These demons are so lazy, they don't even bother coming up with a new script. Libya, you know, Gaddafi was a tyrant, a dictator. He had to go. And then, oh, would you look at that, Libya becomes a failed state, and the North African slave trade comes back like it's 500 BC. Who could have saw that coming? Well, you know, we just wanted to give them some of that good old democracy. And no, it had nothing to do with Gaddafi wanting to move away from the petrodollar, not liking them Rothschild banks. Had nothing to do with that. Shut up. And he called out the demons in control repeatedly, okay? Oh, and 10 years prior to that, Iraq. Same exact script. Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. It's unequivocal. The nerve of these warmongering loons back then. They had so-called scientists on TV claiming they studied the satellite images and knew exactly where the WMDs were hidden. So if you questioned it, you were going against the science. Sound familiar? Well, it should. Same thing they said to you because you refused the Fauci ouchie. Then they removed the so-called bad tyrant dictator Saddam Hussein because, again, democracy. And oh, would you look at that, Iraq turned into a hellhole within a few years, with the Islamic State butchering anyone that disagreed with them, butchering people for playing music, because music, of course, is haram. One Middle Eastern country after another going down like dominoes, pushed over by an Israeli bulldozer. Carving the way for the new Greater Israel Project, of course, and anyone who's been paying attention knows the last country on the map, you know, they want to give that good old democracy to is Iran. And now, to no one's surprise, Israel suddenly has a new deal with Syria, one that lets their intelligence agencies work together in full cooperation. You can't make this up, people. That's a funny way of saying Mossad is now in control of your country. And let's be clear about what this deal actually says, okay? Because the language is deliberately vague. According to the official statement from the United States Department of State, senior Israeli and Syrian officials met under U.S. supervision and agreed to set up what they call a joint fusion mechanism, end quote. That sounds harmless until you actually translate it and, you know, you'll find out what it means. What it really means is a permanent communication cell where Israel and Syria coordinate intelligence sharing, military de-escalation, diplomatic moves, and even commercial activity, all under U.S. oversight. In other words, Syria doesn't just talk to Israel, it clears things through a U.S.-managed channel. This mechanism exists to prevent misunderstandings, which in real terms means Israel gets advanced coordination and freedom of movement while Syria agrees not to interfere. That's not peace, people. That's like forced compliance. Now we know why they installed this guy there. Okay, the Zelensky lookalike. They dressed it up with words like sovereignty and prosperity, but when your intelligence, military decisions, and economic dealings are coordinated through a foreign supervised fusion cell, they say, your country isn't your country anymore, okay? Not sovereign in any way. It's being controlled. And if you want to know what this is really building towards, well, look at what's happening in Iran right now. Protests are breaking out, unrest spreads throughout, and the familiar pressure campaign starts forming around it. Media narratives flip overnight. Foreign-funded NGOs amplify the chaos, and intelligence fingerprints start showing up through the cracks once again. Guess who's funding the uprising, people? Not surprising here. This is how it always begins. The CIA doesn't just roll in with tanks at first. They move money, weapons, training, and messaging through the back door, turning anger into leverage. And then Donald Trump steps in publicly and says if Iran fires on protesters, the United States will get involved. Think about what that actually means. That's not concern for human rights, okay? That's a warning shot. That's telling a country it's not allowed to control unrest inside its own borders without outside consequences. And this isn't being hidden anymore. Former CIA Director Mike Pompeo has openly said that regime change in Iran is the objective and that internal unrest isn't natural. Israeli operatives are staging the uprising. Mossad is arming protesters and get this, planning a major false flag soon to fully carry out a regime change in Iran. When someone who ran U.S. intelligence talks about protests in Iran being manufactured by the deep state instead of, organic grassroots movements, as we were once told, that's a very important note, people. Israel is arming the uprising. Once again, confirming what we all knew, armed rebellions are usually funded by the same demons to install a more obedient regime. Has nothing to do with human rights or people being oppressed. Absolute BS. We've seen this time and time again. I mean, every single time, from the FSA, Free Syrian Army, the rebels in Syria, armed by the CIA and Mossad, which is now basically confirmed, to the Islamic State, ISIS. Go back even further. Hillary Clinton admitted this one, the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. They funded them in order for them to fight the Russians. Osama bin Laden, as we all know, was a CIA asset in the 1980s. This is history repeating itself. Happens every single time, different decade, but the same exact script. And now the last piece on the chopping block, Iran, people. And while that's happening, Syria isn't calm at all. I mean, Aleppo is erupting again. Attacks, shelling, civilians injured, mass displacement, internal security forces warning that the country could slide right back into a full-scale war. So what happened with this plan of removing Bashar al-Assad? He was the one that was making the whole region unstable. Okay, they need to restabilize it by installing who? An ISIS militant? And get this, while Aleppo is going through this right now, Britain is expressing their concern. They want to get involved. Crazy, right? Amnesty calling for a halt. So Syria isn't peaceful, it's being contained. And right in the middle of that, Netanyahu approves a new Israeli attack plan on Iran called Iron Strike. Israel goes on maximum alert. Intelligence branches run war simulations now. This is crazy. 5-hour cabinet meetings discussing timing and stages across every front. Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iran. Netanyahu briefs Trump on priorities and timing. Iran runs missile drills. Air defenses activate over Tehran and Shiraz. When you put it all together, this joint intelligence fusion plan with Syria is starting to make a lot more sense. It has nothing to do with peace. It's about clearing the board to focus on something much bigger so that Israel can, without any restrictions, move east. Now, how weird is this? The guy they installed as the new president in Syria is what they call an ISIS leader. But what if he's not that at all? What if he just calls himself that to keep the radical base on his side? Because why else would he allow something like this? Makes no sense. Think about it. He now works with Israeli intelligence openly and basically letting them know where Islamic underground bases are. This is what it says. He's working with the UK, letting them know where these Islamic terrorists are so that the UK can help bomb them. And this isn't speculation, because just days after this so-called ISIS leader is supposedly running Syria, British and French jets are suddenly allowed to bomb ISIS underground weapons bases inside Syria, using careful intelligence analysis. RAF Typhoons, French aircraft, U.S. coordination, precision strikes on tunnels, no Syrian resistance whatsoever, no backlash. I mean, so let me get this straight. Syria's new leadership is branded Islamist, yet Western militaries are freely striking ISIS targets inside Syrian territory based on shared intelligence. Right after Syria signs a joint intelligence fusion deal with Israel and the U.S., That doesn't look like an enemy state, people. That looks like total control. I mean, they have full access now. They have full control over Syria. That's like someone on the inside pointing to locations and saying, bomb there, bomb here, So all of this does feel extremely weird. Do we have another Israeli puppet in charge of another country? I mean, from the States to Mexico, Venezuela, and back to Syria. They might as well give this Zelensky lookalike over here an Israeli award next. Speaking of the same script playing out, now we've got Bush 2.0 going after Saddam 2.0. Look at the uncanny similarities here, people. What is going on? They said history rhymes. No, it literally repeats word for word. Well, ain't that some... Maduro doesn't just look like Saddam Hussein. He's being framed the exact same way, too. Can you believe that? We deserve better Psy-Ops, okay? More original ones. Let me be clear before anyone starts screaming. I'm not defending Maduro in any way. I'm definitely not defending Venezuela because it did collapse under his watch, of course. The country turned into a disaster, people. People lost everything. Jobs vanished. Inflation wiped out savings. Millions fled. You don't even need mainstream news to see it. You can watch it for yourself. Walkthrough videos, street interviews, panhandlers, street workers across Colombia. Okay, it's actually devastating to watch some of these videos. A huge number of them will tell you the same thing. They came from Venezuela, okay, because they had no opportunity left at home. You see women on street corners with their daughters beside them, okay, trying to survive day to day, trying to make some money for food. They're asking them, why are you standing here? Well, they're selling their bodies because they don't have money, and they all came from a collapsed nation, Venezuela. And they came into Colombia illegally looking to make some money. That's the reality, and it's absolutely tragic. Maduro presided over a failed state, whether through incompetence, corruption, or simply being overwhelmed by forces bigger than him, not sure. None of that is in dispute. What is in dispute is the fairy tale that what's happening now has anything to do with Americans suddenly caring about Venezuelans. If that were true, North Korea would have been flattened decades ago. China would be liberated. Russia as well. They're not. Because this isn't about suffering populations. They don't care. It's about control and resources. Why do you think they're saying ISIS is now in Nigeria? Do you really think they care about the Christians in Nigeria? Christians were slaughtered in Iraq immediately when they removed Saddam Hussein. And then they funded the Islamic State to go kill the Christians. So this is the same thing repeated here, okay? Venezuela as well, it happens to sit on one of the largest proven oil reserves in the world. And that alone explains the obsession. And here's where things get interesting. Venezuela stopped exporting oil to Israel back in 2009, and at the same time was providing free or heavily subsidized heating oil to poor Americans who were literally freezing while their own government looked the other way. Fast forward, and now we're told their oil needs to be secured, in quotes. Their government needs to be removed, and the public is convinced this is the perfectly legal and logical moral step here. How weird is it that 3 days after Netanyahu was on camera saying this,
we've had an unbelievable success by degrading Iran, which was a first-rate power. Now it's a second-rate or third-rate power. They were throwing their weight all over the place, exporting terrorism, not only to every part of the Middle East, but to Venezuela. They're in cahoots with the Maduro regime, They're exporting terrorism to America, to the American hemisphere, and then they want these Hezbollah and Hamas to get their guys into the United States. So Hamas and Iran's and its proxies are a threat not only to us, but to Israel, all America's allies in the Middle East, and to America itself.
The nerve of this scumbag. Back in the early 2000s, he was saying we need to go into Iraq. Saddam Hussein definitely has weapons of mass destruction. Now he's saying Iran, Hamas is actually working in cahoots. Hezbollah is working with Venezuela and we need to go in there, okay? He urged Trump to bomb Venezuela and take Maduro hostage 3 days before Trump actually did it.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months.
They have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly if they wanted to do it.
Iran is so dangerous. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb.
Iran is gearing up to produce 25 bombs, atomic bombs a year.
250 bombs in a decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, time is running out.
Iran will be capable of producing alone, without importing anything, nuclear bombs within 3 to 5 years.
Same exact script. Do they not get tired of reading the same BS? Who's in control, you say, okay? Well, Trump did exactly what Netanyahu wanted, and now that oil is secured. Now, of course, Americans in support of Trump are happy because they think somehow this will lower oil prices, or somehow it will put money in their own pockets. Really, though? What did you get out of any war in the past 100 years? World War II, Vietnam, Desert Storm, the Second Iraq War. Did you see a drop of oil? Did the prices of oil go down when America secured all that oil in Iraq in 2003? No, they exploded. Before 9/11, oil was sitting around $20 a barrel. After Iraq, it didn't get cheaper. It climbed for years, $50, $60, $70 until it finally peaked at almost $150 a barrel in 2008. Gas didn't get cheaper either. Americans paid more at the pump while also paying for the war itself. So if you're waiting for this one to somehow put money in your pocket, history already answered that question. But if being in charge of Iraq's oil didn't benefit the states, then who did it benefit? Well, the answer to that is the same answer to Venezuela. So Venezuela's oil is now secured. Secured by who? Well, the same names and same class of parasites, okay? Same bottom feeders showing up right on schedule. And just how much of a bottom-feeding vulture do you have to be to make Paul Singer look like the final boss of the whole thing? I mean, this guy runs Elliott Management, a straight vulture fund. This isn't investing. This is buying up sovereign bonds for pennies when a country is bleeding out, then dragging them through courts and pressure campaigns until they pay in full. And it's not like he's some harmless spreadsheet nerd either, okay? He's got a track record of gutting entire companies, closing factories and hollowing out Midwest towns like it's a hobby, then walking away richer while everyone else gets laid off and forgotten. And now, surprise, surprise, he's positioned to cash in on Venezuela too. Venezuela Analysis reported that Elliott was picked as the winning bidder in a court-mandated auction tied to Venezuela's U.S. refiner Citgo. So when they say Venezuela's oil is secured, you start to realize what that really means. Secured for the debt sharks, okay? Secured for the claim holders. Secured for the DICs, people. The same ones who are waiting for the country to get destroyed just enough that the assets could be scooped up cheap, okay? And if you want to know what causes are near and dear to Singer's wallet, what he's emotionally invested in, what he keeps funding, well, here's your answer. Okay, basically all of the things that were in those books the Nazis burned. That's right. He's a major pro-Israel donor and he funds a whole ecosystem around that. You've got money flowing into groups like AIPAC, LGBT causes as well, same-sex marriage, Antifa, leftist organizations. This man funds it all. BBO is another one. The world's largest pluralistic Jewish teen movement. He funds that as well. Whatever aligns with influence and access. And his foundation donations are right there in the tax filings. Okay, you see it right here. It says $3.3 million in 2021 to groups like Birthright Israel Foundation, the Israel America Academic Exchange, Boundless Israel, and others. Interesting the number too, right? 3.3 million and also employs 6 million people exactly. Oh, interesting. I'm telling you, these people love that number. Then you look at the think tanks and pressure shops, and it's the same things. He funds the American Enterprise Institute, AEI, the Hawkish Foundation for Defense of Democracies, FDD, the Republican Jewish Coalition, RJC, and he helped bankroll the now defunct Foreign Policy Initiative, FPI. So yeah, rhetorical question time. Any American causes near and dear to his wallet? Any bring back the jobs energy? Any help the towns you wrecked energy? You already know the answer. And it gets better because Singer's not just profiting off of foreign assets and debt pressure. He's tied into the bigger pipeline where U.S. tech gets hollowed out and shifted overseas. While Americans get laid off by companies like Google, Microsoft, Intel, you see key operations and billions in investment moving into Israel. Thousands of jobs moving out while the public gets told it's just business. And on top of that, you've got these same companies hiring people out of controversial Israeli firms that have been accused of spying on Americans. American companies, even U.S. agencies, and you've got former Israeli military intelligence types showing up as managers and executives in the exact places you'd expect: security, data, infrastructure, decision-making. So when the media asks who benefits, stop looking for a cartoon villain. Okay, it's this. These are the people right here, the donors, funds, courts, think tanks, influence networks, and the same war policy narratives that always shows up right before the resources get secured. These people got you by the balls, you guys. They treat you like they treat Teslas. Funny video right here. I don't know who this guy is, but he's gonna be a big comedian.
Come here. Come here, you made by a guy car. Oh, guy.
The reason I like Teslas is because it doesn't use gas.
Turn left.
You smelling pennies?
Now turn left.
See, even Teslas we control.
Tesla, go in the driveway. Good guy. Good
That's how Netanyahu controls the USA.
guy.
See, even us Jews control the cars because we're superior.
This guy is pure comedy. You know, I don't know who this guy is, but he really is a base Jew. Shout out to him, because there's another video here. It's actually hilarious.
It's the Jews. It's not the Jews, bro.
It is the Jews.
It is billionaire psychopaths that have sold the world for profit.
So, in other words, the Jews.
Christians United for Israel has over 10 million members in the United States, and there's only 7.5 million Jews living in the U.S.
And yet we still run the world. And we still own the media and everything. So, it is the Jews.
For centuries in Europe, Jews were strictly prevented from owning land, holding public office, or performing all sorts of professions.
Can we please not talk about that?
Saying Jews are just good with money is about as ridiculous as saying, oh, black people are just better at sports.
Well, it's true, ain't it?
What it does show is that black people, especially in poor areas, will turn to sports more than their white counterparts because of the simple fact that they have less access to economic opportunities.
Because again, the Jews.
And in all honesty, if Jews secretly had all this power and money, do you really think I'd be working a job right now?
Actually, I don't see this, and I don't see this, so, does add up.
That's hilarious. This guy is a base Jew. Shout out to him. He is really killing it on social media. I'm seeing his videos everywhere, and they got me dying over here. He's really, really one of a kind. I wonder how fast he's going to get hit with one of those anti-Semitic hate crime charges. Absolute comedy. But now apparently, Venezuela, Iran, all of these places invaded, regime change, the same blueprint every time. But here's another one. Greenland. Trump is not hanging this one up, people. It's next on the chopping block. Okay, as you can see right here, it says Trump indicates America will take Greenland. It will either be the easy way or the hard way. We are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not. If we don't do it the easy way, we're going to have to do it the hard way. If we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland. And we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor, okay? End quote. And now Denmark is saying if the U.S. steps foot in Greenland, it will be a bloodbath. Can you guys believe it? It's getting really wild out here. They actually say this word for word. Look, Danish troops would be required to take up arms and fight should the United States attempt to invade Greenland. Shoot first, ask questions later, they say. The Danish Defense Ministry has said amid alarm in Europe at Donald Trump's insistence that America needs to acquire this strategic Arctic island. And even the Dutch want to get involved as well. As seen on this Twitter post, Dutch voters want the Netherlands to intervene when the U.S. invades Greenland. They would also rather abolish NATO than to make Denmark give up Greenland. Absolute madness, folks. World War incoming? Wouldn't that be hilarious if it plays out that way, Russia and the U.S. fighting on the same side against the EU? Absolute insanity. There's also something worth noting here because this doesn't get talked about a lot. When Maduro was captured, you guys remember how many different outfit changes he had? Over a very short window of time, like in one day, Maduro appears to have multiple different outfits across official photos and videos, different shirts, different jackets, different looks, all supposedly within the same narrow time frame. I mean, doesn't that raise a few questions here? How many times did this dude change? into different clothes. High-level political extractions don't usually come with this many wardrobe changes unless, footage is being staged, reordered, or released selectively. I'm not saying this proves anything by itself, but it does reinforce the broader point that this wasn't raw, chaotic, unfolding reality we were dealing with, okay? It looks managed, curated, and set up like theater, just packaged perfectly for the public consumption. And when optics are this controlled, it's reasonable to ask how much of what you're seeing is real time and how much of it is presentation. The U.S. military was so caring, okay? They even gave Maduro his own stylist. Funny, they branded him a narco threat, dragged out under the banner of stopping drugs, paraded like a cartel boss, even though Venezuela wasn't producing fentanyl and wasn't flooding American streets with poison. Meanwhile, the Sackler family, through Purdue Pharma, knowingly helped unleash Oxycontin on the U.S., lied about the addiction risks, and reigned over this opioid epidemic that killed more than 500,000 Americans, and not one of them went to prison. No midnight raids, no consequences to that, of course, no. Just settlements and legal immunity. They've been using that word immunity a lot lately, similar to how ICE apparently has absolute immunity for shooting people in the face. Oh, and like the vaccines as well. They have, the vaccine makers have total immunity too. Think about what that word means at this point. How many lives were destroyed by the COVID vaccines? How many people lost loved ones, parents that lost children? Breaks my heart to see. These stories, they really are devastating, especially as a father now. Unimaginable pain. Hundreds of thousands killed in just North America. And that's not including the people diagnosed with turbo cancers, sepsis, autoimmune disorders, or even permanent neurological problems too. I can't think of a bigger weapon of mass destruction like the one that was in that syringe. Has anyone went to prison for the mass slaughter? Has anyone been held accountable? Biden administration for mandating the death shot, Trudeau's government, Boris Johnson, Trump, the father of the most dangerous injection to ever be invented. No accountability whatsoever. Every single one of these bastards are just roaming free, living their best lives. Trudeau is out here on yachts with Katy Perry. Boris Johnson was probably given his own pedophile island somewhere. Trump rolls out the red carpet for the Pfizer CEO, tells him his work during COVID was extraordinary. These people couldn't care less about a deadly substance that harms Americans. Fentanyl, Oxycontin, you name it. If they had a shred of decency, they would announce that all vaccines are murder weapons, that all big pharma slop is straight up poison, but the only time they actually remove something from the shelves is when people are willing to do the research and enough people wake up. They start looking into the horrific effects of some of these products. The average person is becoming more and more lazy though. So I don't expect any real thorough research being done by people at this point. Through endless algorithmic propaganda, TikTok attention spans, terrible foods, and endless vaccines, the demons in control have successfully created a lobotomized population that simply does not have the energy for basically anything except, doom scrolling until their brains turn into fried omelets. That's it. And get this, Maduro even pointed out that roughly 85% of cartel money is laundered through U.S. and allied banking systems. Hundreds of billions a year, flowing clean through financial institutions. Suddenly, he wasn't just inconvenient. He was dangerous after saying this stuff out loud. That's when the narrative hardens. This was never about drugs, it was about control. And the way Maduro was taken lets us all know it was pure theater. Okay? Looking extra staged. Cameras ready, no real resistance. Maduro was taken with no fight whatsoever. They did say around 75 to 80 people died, which is horrific, but Maduro put up no fight at all. Wouldn't you die for your nation or something? Just to stand up, be a stand-up man like that, a hero? Of course not. That doesn't look like a kidnapping. It looks like an extraction that has already been approved. Look at this right here. Leaders who survive coup attempts for over a decade don't get caught sleeping unless the game is already over. Whether Maduro was incompetent, compromised, or simply boxed in doesn't change the outcome. His removal weakened the Chavista movement, cleared resistance, and opened the door for the same regime change machinery we've seen everywhere else. Different country, same script. WMD, aka drug war, drug war BS sold to the public again. And here's why that framing matters, because it's not just propaganda, it's legal cover. International law is built on one basic rule. Countries don't get to invade other countries whenever they feel like it. You've got sovereignty, you've got the UN Charter's prohibition on the use of force. And then you've got the narrow excuses powerful states hide behind to pretend they're still playing by the rules. Self-defense, consent, or a Security Council mandate. So what do? They don't call it a war, they call it law enforcement. That's exactly what Russia did when they went into Ukraine. They didn't call it a war, they called it a special military operation. They don't say we attacked a state, they say we conducted an operation. They don't say regime change, they say restoring democracy or counter narcotics. Because if you can sell it as policing cartel networks instead of attacking a government, you dodge the word war. You dodge accountability, and you make anyone who objects sound like they're defending criminals. That's the trick. You change the label and suddenly the same act becomes legal in the public mind. And once that door is open, it's not just Venezuela, it's any country they want to treat like a crime scene instead of a sovereign state. But behind the curtains, world leaders are shaking hands, paid big bucks to carry on the agenda. Oil, profits, and overall obedience to the deep state. And I'm not defending Maduro or communism, okay? Venezuela collapsed under him, that's obvious. But democracy can't be installed at gunpoint. If the people don't have the heart to rise up themselves, overthrow their own government, tear out the parasites, and build something fair, then they don't have the heart to keep a country alive in the long run. You can't step in from the outside and accelerate democracy if the people there don't have the fight in them to sustain it. And I'm saying this because we've seen this fail over and over and over again. Endless examples. Different countries, same outcome. After Maduro was already in U.S. custody, after the operation was finished and the justification no longer mattered, the Justice Department quietly changed its language here. This is nuts. The cartel they had been spending over a year pointing to as the legal basis for seizures and military action was no longer a cartel. That's right, people. In court filings now, prosecutors stopped calling Cartel de los Soles an organization at all and admitted it was essentially a nickname, a slang term that had been used for years to describe corruption inside the Venezuelan military and political system. No structure, no leadership chain, no terrorist group, just a description, okay? A cute little nickname. That correction didn't come from critics or outside pressure. It came from the same department that wrote the original indictment. Once they actually had to prove something in a courtroom instead of repeating it on television. The sequence here matters. A claim is treated as fact until it has done its work, okay? Only afterward, when evidence is required and the outcome is already locked in, does the language change. That same pattern showed up in Iraq, claims about weapons of mass destruction, and even Al-Qaeda. They were saying Al-Qaeda was working in Iraq. Then they quietly walked all of that back once the invasion was complete and the country was already in ruins. Okay, oops, no WMDs, and looks like Al-Qaeda wasn't here. The admissions came early enough to matter legally, but late enough to change nothing on the ground. Venezuela followed the same order. The accusation justified the action. The action came first, and then the correction later. Oops, I guess he wasn't involved in a cartel in any way. Buried in the filings most people will never read. And even after the Justice Department backed away from the claim, officials kept repeating it publicly because the narrative no longer needed to be accurate. It just needed to stay useful. By the time the story collapsed under scrutiny, the country had already been reframed from a sovereign state into a criminal problem, and everything that followed could be treated as enforcement instead of aggression. And just to know which other warmongering lunatic was blackmailed by Epstein, well, check this out. Lindsey Graham goes on television and openly threatens the leadership of Iran again, telling the Ayatollah that he'd better allow Mossad-backed protest movements to overthrow the government or he's gonna wake up dead, end quote. This guy, the language he chooses is absurd. He then declares that Iran is on the verge of collapse and reassures the Iranian people that more help is on the way. And anyone who's been paying attention knows what that word means in practice. Okay, the U.S. is coming to save you and give you democracy? Really? You're going to use that line? not humanitarian aid, okay, not diplomacy, sanctions, destabilization, covert operations, and eventually bombs. Okay, that's what they mean. Millions displaced and dead. We've seen this time and time again. This is a sitting U.S. senator publicly endorsing regime change and assassination threats in the same breath, framed as concern for freedom. Tie that back to Syria being opened up through intelligence fusion deals, Venezuela being dismantled under drug war theatrics, and the same pressure campaign now tightening around Iran. It starts to look all coordinated here. It becomes impossible to pretend these are just isolated comments. This is the mindset behind what's driving this worldwide policy here. The mask is being ripped off, okay? Netanyahu even starts playing numbers games with human lives. He says 1,000 Israelis dying on October 7th is equivalent to 40,000 Americans. Okay, that's pretty crazy. Think about how weird that is. Since when do we convert deaths like currencies? One life lost is one life lost. But when you start scaling bodies like this, he's treating lives like he's comparing stocks. It's not about mourning anymore. It's about priming people for more killing. And it's important to note here that the IDF has admittedly killed the majority of their own people that day. So the comparisons to 9/11 are really interesting, right? Considering it's another false flag that conveniently accelerated the Greater Israel Project. Yeah. First, they redefined the problem. Suddenly, fentanyl isn't a crime issue anymore. It's a weapon of mass destruction. Then you start seeing military action justified as anti-cartel operations, bombing ships in the Caribbean and selling it as law enforcement instead of warfare. After that comes the familiar language, as we've all seen time and time again. Maduro is a dictator. Venezuela is a threat. And now it's about national security, okay, and freeing the people of Venezuela. Then the bombs start falling, always packaged as democracy, freedom, humanitarian intervention. And once everything's destroyed and taken over, only then do they admit there were never any WMDs. But by that point, it doesn't matter because the real objective is already secured. Control of Venezuela, a country sitting on the largest oil reserve in the world. And once you recognize that pattern, it's impossible not to see where it goes next. You take the same blueprint, you change the country name, and you point it straight at Iran. We've seen this movie play out time and time again. Okay, and now Netanyahu comes out and says Israel is preparing to end its dependence on U.S. military aid within the next decade, claiming Israel's economy and defense sector are strong enough to stand on their own, while still saying he'll fight for the American people, end quote. Like, think about how backwards that sounds. Fighting for Americans while no longer needing anything from them, okay? But this isn't sudden. This was planned decades ago. Netanyahu was already talking about, in the 1990s, how Israel was moving toward economic independence from the United States, meaning the buildup phase was already underway back then. And while Americans were paying, Israel was scaling tech, intelligence, defense, cyber, all of it. I mean, they were spying and stealing tech all of those years. Now look at where it leads here. Israel is openly positioning itself as a global AI command hub. 95% of its high-tech workforce is already using AI tools. Nearly 80% use them daily. AI startup funding is exploding, jumping billions in a single year. NVIDIA isn't just investing there. I mean, it's calling it its second home. Next generation processors, data center infrastructure, all being designed and built there. On top of that, the Israeli government is funding a national AI supercomputer, deliberately keeping regulations soft so the system can scale fast without friction. For a country that small, that kind of concentrated power isn't normal. That's not organic growth. They're using military, from Palantir to Carbine and all of these AI central command structures, intelligence, academia, industry, finance, AI all fused together. A 10 million person state is now running at the top of the empire, people. So it looks like Benjamin Netanyahu has clearly sucked the American empire dry. A golden calf. We will suck it dry, chop it up, and sell it off piece by piece until there is nothing left but the world's biggest welfare state that we will create and control. This is what we do to countries we hate. We destroy them slowly, and now they're declaring victory. The head of the AI surveillance grid. No need for economic aid anymore. They're officially taking over. And speaking of AI taking over, look at what's already happening online here. I mean, this is basically them admitting to it all. Even Israeli media admits that a massive portion of political discourse isn't even real, okay? Roughly half of political active accounts are bots, coordinated AI accounts that like and share Netanyahu's posts within seconds of upload, faster than a human could even watch the video. The goal isn't persuasion, it's algorithmic control. You flood the first minute with engagement, and that tricks the platform into thinking something is trending, something is important, and more people need to see it. And the system amplifies it automatically. It's fake momentum, okay? Synthetic consensus. The entire narrative is being engineered by AI bots. Are you noticing a pattern here? The same country building AI supercomputers and cyber dominance is also running bot armies to steer public perception. AI isn't just running weapon systems and surveillance grids, it's brainwashing people into believing what's important and what's popular, what feels not important, and what should disappear. So when Netanyahu talks about ending USA, don't read it as, independence. Read it as like a graduation. The extraction phase is over. The infrastructure is already built. The technology has been centralized. This is what Palantir was doing. The control layer is already operational. Ending USA doesn't mean Israel needs America less. It means it no longer needs American money. And get this, Grok admits that since the start of 2026, X has been suppressing and censoring posts critical of Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu at the request of the ADL. This is absolutely crazy. Automated visibility signals that can throttle reach or certain topics. Content involving Israel, U.S. aid, Palestine, or Netanyahu often gets flagged internally for higher scrutiny. Someone posted this pic. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Elon Musk. So Alex Karp, the head demon in charge of Palantir, that's right, the HDIC, or one of them, a company embedded in military intelligence and AI-driven targeting, he buys up $120 million of a former Catholic monastery on thousands of acres of land outside Aspen. Private water, secluded land, and limited access. It sounds like he's trying to set up a billionaire bunker here, okay? And the symbolism is what matters the most. These weren't places built for power and surveillance. They were built for faith, worshiping God, and now they're being absorbed by the same Jewish technocratic class, building digital control systems for everyone else. So BlackRock is, going from buying up neighborhoods, buying up businesses, but also just straight up owning religious places too. Buying up monasteries. Someone said soon to be named Epstein Monastery. Yeah, I'm sure that he's going to use that for some positive reason, right? Economy's not doing good, people. Worldwide economy is not doing good. I mean, even churches are up for sale. Let's move on here to a feel-good story out of communist Canada, because the absurdity here is now hitting UK levels, okay? Health Canada raids a woman's clinic in Kelowna like the U.S. military rolled into Venezuela, okay? Like she was Nicolas Maduro sitting on hidden weapons of mass destruction. It's like they accused this woman of having WMDs. And did she ever? I mean, vitamin D tablets, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, antibiotics, a testosterone gel, prescription level D3, creams, pills, vitamins, the horror. They seize everything, publish a national public advisory, warn consumers to immediately stop using the products, bring in border services to block imports, and tell the public these items may pose serious health risks because they weren't approved, didn't have the right DIN numbers, they said, and weren't sold through licensed pharmacies. Health Canada openly admits the real issue isn't bodies piling up, it's that these products weren't assessed by them for safety, efficacy, and quality. You know how they did the COVID vaccine? That the dosage might be higher or lower than the label says, that they might interact with other meds. Okay, it's all BS they're writing on their own page here. And that the clinic allegedly made unauthorized claims about treating serious illness like cancer. That's the crime, okay? Not violence, not overdose deaths, not harm on the street, but selling off-label meds and vitamins without the state's permission. So they shut her business down like it was a national security threat. Now, you know how insane that is? All of this because a woman was selling ivermectin? In Canada, there's pop-up shops where people are selling crack and cocaine and heroin. Okay, just to contrast that, health clinic raided was something outrageous here. Check this out. I mean, CBC just exposed this. Hard drugs like cocaine, heroin, ecstasy, openly advertised online, not on the dark web, okay, but on Facebook ads. You heard that right. They're being promoted through legitimate sponsored ads on Facebook and Instagram, platforms owned by Meta, a company that makes over 90% of its money from advertising. These ads, they look professional, polished, reassuring too, telling buyers the drugs are tested, safe, and discreet. People click the link, add to cart, pay with credit card or e-transfers. They even get a Canada Post tracking number and have cocaine delivered straight to their community mailbox like it's Amazon Prime. CBC actually followed buyers and they followed them around with cameras to see how easy this process was. You're not going to believe this. They followed them step by step. They watched the packages arrive, had the drugs tested at harm reduction clinics, confirmed it was real, high purity cocaine, and social workers openly admit this has been common knowledge for a while now. Okay, Meta refuses on-camera interviews, but they sent a canned email saying it's a constant whack-a-mole here, okay, and they can't really do anything about the issue. It just constantly pops up. So they gave up. Canada Post admits it intercepts a microscopic fraction of parcels, but police officers say they hadn't even heard about the sites, and the RCMP sends a vague statement claiming they're actively targeting networks, while at the same time, drug sites keep popping up under new domains during the investigation. Think about how insane this is. You watch a video on Facebook, and the ad playing could literally be a drug dealer saying he got the best coke in town, okay? Best heroin, cleanest product. Here's my e-transfer. Here's your tracking number. They said we'd have flying cars in 2026. No, all we got is commercials selling crack and heroin, while vitamin D gets treated like a weapon of mass destruction. Yeah, welcome to Canada, folks, where if you sell ivermectin, you're basically Maduro with WMDs, but sell hard drugs through sponsored social media ads, and the government shrugs and calls it complicated. And isn't it crazy that at the same time, there's something called Bill C-2 coming forward, the Strong Borders Act. So they're allowing this to happen on purpose. Drug dealers are using ads and sending out cocaine through Canada Post packages. At the same time, Bill C-2 is speeding through in Parliament, and that is an act to expand the authority for Canada Post and law enforcement to inspect mail and packages, everyone's, including letters. It sounds exactly like a Hegelian dialectic over here. Problem, reaction, solution. And of course, they're allowing these drug dealers to do this so they can steal more of our rights away. Soon, every single package here is going to have to be gone through, like mandatory. No freedom at all. But how weird is this? Darvocet was prescribed for decades. Doctors handed it out like it was harmless because the FDA labeled it was safe. And this is why I don't put any faith in the phrase FDA approved, and people need to really snap out of it and wake up. Basically, all poison is Health Canada approved and FDA approved, because the same exact thing keeps happening. Who remembers Darvocets? Remember that one? That was a prescription painkiller. Doctors gave it out for headaches, back pain, post-surgery pain, all of it. It was supposed to be a mild opioid, safer than the strong stuff, mixed with acetaminophen, basically sold as a responsible option. And doctors prescribed it for almost 50 years, 5 decades, okay? Physicians doing exactly what the system told them to do. And for that entire time, this Darvocet medication had people dying suddenly. Not slowly, not from addiction, sudden heart rhythm failure, dropping dead, taking the drug exactly as prescribed, okay? And nobody caught it, or worse, nobody stopped it. And here's the part that makes it unforgivable. After they finally pulled it, they admitted it wasn't even that effective. It barely worked. Some studies showed it wasn't much better than plain Tylenol. Let that sink in. A drug that stayed on the market half a century, quietly increasing the risk of sudden cardiac death, and it didn't even outperform over-the-counter pain relievers. And it took until 2010 for them to finally pull it off the shelves. Think about the scumbags behind this medication that were getting rich off of it. And when they pulled it from the shelves, once again, no apology, no prison time whatsoever for all the lives they took. Just a quiet admission and yeah, it could just stop your heart randomly. Oops, 50 years too late. That's the system, people. That's the precedent. And when people act like regulatory approval means something permanent, or sacred or settled. Remember, Darvocet sat on pharmacy shelves long enough to kill generations of people before anyone admitted there was a problem, and nobody paid for it. Ever. So a drug that barely worked better than Tylenol stayed on the market for 50 years while quietly increasing the risk of sudden cardiac death. And the medical system didn't catch it until bodies stacked up enough to be statistically convenient. Because if you think we're done learning that lesson, you haven't been paying attention. They'll have no problem admitting the COVID vaccines were strictly poison 50 years from now. And then this shows up, which straight up feels like another Psy-Op here if you really look into it. Look at this right here. A peer-reviewed review gets published in OncoTarget on January 3rd, authored by cancer researchers out of Tufts and Brown. And it reviews 69 already published studies from 27 countries, covering data from 2020 through 2025, flagging 333 cases where cancer either appeared for the first time or suddenly accelerated within weeks or months of COVID vaccination. Not one country, not one hospital reports from U.S., Japan, China, Italy, Spain, South Korea, global, and the authors are careful, almost overly careful, to say they're not claiming causation, just patterns showing up over and over in the existing literature. Some of those patterns aren't subtle either. Tumors forming near injection sites, slow cancers that had been stable suddenly flaring up. Massive population data sets too, including a U.S. military cohort of 1.3 million service members showing increases in certain blood cancers after 2021, an Italian review of 300,000 people, and a South Korean dataset of 8.4 million showing higher rates of thyroid, breast, prostate, lung, and colon cancers among the vaccinated, with higher rates showing up in people who took more doses and boosters. Younger adults under 65 showing more thyroid and breast cancers, seniors over 75 showing more prostate cancers. All of that is in the paper. And then days later, the journal's website goes down. Bad gateway errors. Site inaccessible. OncoTarget claims a cyber attack happened. Says they reported it to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And suddenly the research can't be accessed through the journal itself. One of the authors goes public saying this looks like censorship, that published information about COVID vaccines and cancer signals is being blocked from reaching the scientific community. The journal vaguely suggests, without evidence, that it might be tied to post-publication reviewers like PubPeer, who immediately deny any involvement. No confirmation of an investigation. No explanation beyond technical disruption. And this is where it clicks with Darvocet, okay? Not because everyone's saying this proves anything yet, but because this is exactly how the early stage always looks. Signals get documented, reviews get published, the language stays cautious, the liability stays off the table, and then access gets interrupted. And the system buys itself time, just like Darvocet. The admission never comes when the data first appears. It comes decades later, when the exposure window is long closed. The damage is already done, okay? And everyone involved can say, honestly, that at that time, they didn't know. And once you understand that pattern, the next part isn't even subtle, because when access suddenly disappears, when a journal goes dark or a website throws a bad gateway error, we're trained to think accident or just a coincidence. But we already know as a matter of public record that blackouts and digital outages are not only easy to manufacture, they're now standard tools of the deep state. Take Venezuela, for example. In January, Donald Trump openly said the U.S. shut off the lights in Venezuela using what he called certain expertise, okay, high-level tech to cause blackouts there during the operation to capture Nicolas Maduro. He didn't hint at it, okay? He bragged about it, said it out loud. U.S. officials then confirmed the operation involved land, air, sea, space, and cyber assets working together. Cyber Command and Space Command were explicitly named as part of the mission support. Analysts explained that this didn't require anything exotic. You can manipulate transmission nodes, or you can use cyber access that's been quietly in place for years in a country with aging infrastructure and terrible cybersecurity. You don't need a miracle, you just need timing. And that's the key detail here, is that even the experts admitted something really important. If cyber operations were used, there would be almost no public proof. Power goes out, servers go dark, and everyone argues afterward about whether it was kinetic, cyber, or infrastructure failure. The effect is the same, just a straight up blackout that causes darkness, and the US military declares confusion and plausible deniability. The US military itself describes this as layered effects, using cyber the same way it uses air or ground forces, just another domain. So when a medical journal publishes a review pulling together cancer signals tied to the COVID rollout, and then the journal suddenly becomes inaccessible and the explanation is a cyber attack, the idea that this could be engineered is not speculative. I mean, it's established capability. We watched it happen to a capital city during a live military operation. We've been told directly that this is how modern power works, which means the real question isn't whether outages can be staged, it's whether we're naive enough to believe they only happen to enemies overseas. And never when inconvenient information needs to stall, blur, or quietly fall out of public reach. So we can zoom out from the medicine angle of this, and we see it happening all around the world. This is about infrastructure and how fragile it is, actually by design. Berlin just experienced its longest blackout since World War II, and we're told it was due to a small arson incident. One fire, one critical power cable destroyed, and suddenly tens of thousands of homes are without electricity, heat, cell service, and transit for days in the middle of winter. Some reports are saying it was like -5 over there, okay? Really, really crazy stuff. Thousands of businesses were shut down, trains stopped, communications failed. The German military had to assist civilians just to keep things functioning. So the German military had to get involved right away. Authorities immediately blamed a far-left extremist group with a track record of targeting energy infrastructure, including areas near Tesla's Berlin area factory. The narrative was wrapped up fast and handed to the public as isolated sabotage. But what matters isn't who lit the match. What matters is what the incident demonstrated in real time. One point of failure can cripple an entire modern city. Electricity goes down and everything else follows within hours. Heat, data, payments, transportation, emergency response. The system doesn't degrade slowly, it collapses all at once. This might be a real beta test here for the bigger one. So the US admits they could do it to nations, a place where cancer studies related to the COVID vaccine is being shut down due to cyber attacks. I mean, it seems like something is happening behind the scenes like clockwork. And of course, in Germany, guess what they want now because of this outage? Well, they want more monitoring, more surveillance, of course. They might even get Palantir in there to prevent the next blackout. This is all problem, reaction, solution stuff. It's always the same thing, all justified under the language of protection. Nobody questions why a city of millions of people can be knocked offline so easily. This doesn't look like an accident. It looks like a beta test. They turned the power off and they want to see the social response. They measured the compliance. And then they come in with the solution they always wanted. We've now seen this play out in different forms in different countries under different labels. Military operations, extremist attacks, infrastructure failures. It's all the same-ish. Darkness, dependence, and justification for tighter control afterwards. That's the reality of centralized grids. They're efficient when everything behaves and incredibly useful when someone wants leverage. Because once electricity becomes a switch instead of a service, every outage becomes a message. Now keep in mind the next big one could be blamed on rogue Chinese AI. Because as you can see here, AI firm claims Chinese spies use its tech to automate cyber attacks. AI complexity leads to demands for better cybersecurity in 2026. Are we ready for a rogue AI attack? We should be, says James Pethokoukis. That's his name. I mean, think about this. We now know the US has advanced weapons that can shut down grids. Blackouts can happen on command when an operation needs conditions to line up. And it's not just power. Cyber attacks are used the same way, shutting websites down when people aren't supposed to be looking too closely at something, a major study pulling together, cancers tied to the COVID vaccine rollout, and that suddenly disappears, and the explanation is a convenient, did you look at that? It was a cyber attack. Yeah, okay. Let me guess. Rogue Chinese AI, right? And then Berlin has blackouts, and that's framed as arson. But really, it was a beta test for like military response and civilian behavior in real time. And now get this. Advanced directed energy weapon tech was used in Venezuela too. Remember Havana syndrome? U.S. personnel reported head pressure, nausea, nosebleeds, neurological problems. For years, we were told it was just stress or coincidence or mass hysteria, they say. Venezuela is where the truth finally gets revealed here, okay? According to a witness account shared by the White House press secretary, U.S. forces used a weapon during the raid on Maduro that Venezuelan soldiers couldn't fight against. Radar systems suddenly went dark, communications failed, drones appeared overhead. This is really interesting. It goes to show, what were those drones doing in New Jersey a year back? Remember that? And a lot of people said they were feeling head pains, radiation spiked. So now we know who could be really behind this. Then a few helicopters came in during the invasion in Venezuela, deploying what the Guard estimated was only about 20 U.S. troops. They were massively outnumbered, but it didn't matter. Okay, the U.S. used advanced weaponry. The person on the ground here said it wasn't even a battle. It was more like a total shutdown. The troops moved with speed and precision he'd never seen before. Then something was deployed that he couldn't fully describe. He said it felt like intense pressure in the head, like his head was about to explode. Pay attention to the wording here. Almost immediately, soldiers started bleeding from the nose, some vomiting blood. Many collapsed and couldn't stand or move. No explosion, no visible weapon, just instant incapacitation. Venezuela later reported around 100 security personnel killed in the operation, though it's unclear how many deaths were directly caused by that advanced weapon. A former U.S. intelligence source said the symptoms line up with what directed energy weapons are capable of doing. Systems that use focused energy like microwaves to disable targets without conventional force. According to that source, versions of this tech have existed for decades, and similar weapons have already been used elsewhere. Okay? Go read Judy Wood's book. It's crazy. Where did the towers go? They've had this tech for decades, and that's the point. This isn't sci-fi. Grid shutdowns, cyber disruptions, drone swarms, and then directed energy weapons. These are active tools. It's like they're beta testing these tools to pull off Project Bluebeam later, Fake holographic projections in the sky, and then directed energy weapons to have people incapacitated, feeling like their heads are going to explode. The aliens want us to get vaccinated, is obviously what they're going to tell us. But this is crazy. These tools, they don't need bombs or declarations. They just flip switches. They can knock systems offline, drop people to the ground, and leave everyone arguing afterward about what really happened. By the time the explanations come out, the operation is already over. And here's where it gets really strange, people. Right after this raid, right after soldiers are describing head pressure and internal pain, feeling like their heads are exploding, Vice suddenly publishes an article a few days after this invasion with the title, Exploding Head Syndrome. How crazy is this? They're like, this syndrome is more prevalent than we ever thought. Perfect timing, right? According to doctors, it's just a sleep condition where people hear a sudden, violent bang or feel a shock in the head while falling asleep or waking up. No external cause, no pain, just the brain misfiring during sleep. A dramatic name for something we're told is pretty harmless. Exploding head syndrome, it just happens to some people. Don't worry about it. So let me put this plainly. If electromagnetic force can shut down grids like an EMP, if it can knock out radar and communications across a city, then pretending it can't affect the human body is absurd. EMF doesn't stop working when it hits biology, like they want us to believe. 6G is perfectly harmless. Don't worry about it. Yeah, right. And we already have years of Havana syndrome reports describing the same sensations. What was brushed off as just a conspiracy theory before suddenly looks a lot less accidental now. So when the media all work together now to convince you, if you feel like your head is exploding, that's just a quirky little sleep disorder, nothing to really look into. I think that's narrative control. Okay, they're labeling it early to make sure it sounds like something that's internal. It's just something that's wrong with your body because they don't want you looking at the external energy systems around you or even military tech. Let's stop pretending that 5G and now even 6G are only for faster downloads. These are dense electromagnetic networks everywhere, always on, centrally controlled. Once that infrastructure exists, it becomes a weapon the moment someone decides to use it that way. Just like grids, just like cyber attacks, we're seeing entire swarms of birds dropping from the sky at the same time. I mean, it looks like they were zapped with some kind of directed energy weapon. So no, I don't buy the coincidence, people. We watched a capital city go dark during a military operation. We heard accounts of soldiers collapsing from some invisible force. The U.S. is bragging they have advanced tech that can cause blackouts and have your head feeling like it's exploding. Maybe that's why Trump was talking about bringing up the Golden Dome, a system where if you think the wrong thought, your head explodes like a scene out of Total Recall. So if an EMP attack happens soon, we will know who to blame. Everything feels off. Like, not just the news, but the entire world we're watching. I know you guys can feel it too. Almost nobody you see on TV anymore can be trusted. Mainstream media, alternative media, doesn't matter. It's the same stage, just different costumes. You've got people who are supposed to be enemies, opposites, rivals, all secretly running in the same circles behind the scenes. We hear reports of Candace Owens, Alex Jones, Ben Shapiro, Erica Kirk standing next to Nicki Minaj. They're all lounging in Valhalla somewhere. The whole thing feels like theater. Roles assigned, lines delivered, everybody's playing their part. And when the role is finished, when the character has served its purpose, they don't disappear. They get retired, promoted, moved somewhere off screen. Maduro, Epstein. People were told are either monsters, villains, or locked away forever. Maybe some of them aren't gone at all. Maybe they're just done playing their part. The world is a stage, and when the mission is complete, the actors get rewarded, while the audience keeps believing the story. And once you see it that way, you start noticing which actors seem to know what's coming before the lights go out. Take Erica Kirk, for example, because watching her talk about blackouts, EMP attacks, or grid failure hits differently once you realize she didn't stumble into this topic by accident. Back in 2013, long before her current public role, she appeared in a documentary called Black Start USA, not as a commentator or media personality, but briefing intelligence and national security officials on how an EMP attack could cripple the U.S. power grid. James Woolsey was involved, who was the director of the CIA from 1993 to 1995, which tells you exactly what level this was operating at. This wasn't social media speculation or abstract fear. It was vulnerability analysis at the national security level. It was a bunch of deep state puppets talking about national security needs to be ramped up because of an incoming EMP attack. Years before blackouts and grid collapses entered everyday conversation. Think about that. All of this happened long before she married Charlie Kirk, and long before she became CEO of Turning Point USA, which is why people started looking more closely at her background. I mean, the acting, beauty pageants, media training, then quietly, deep exposure to grid failure scenarios. And the family side doesn't make it clearer, it makes it stranger. Her mother, Lori Frantsev, founded companies specializing in EMP-hardened technology, with Department of Defense contracts protecting high-level government facilities, the White House, Congress, the exact systems designed to stay online if everything else goes dark. So when blackout warnings show up now, they don't feel hypothetical, they feel like someone reading from a script they've already lived through. They are predicting chaos. This is predictive programming on a grand scale here, preparing people for the upcoming blackout. Maybe it's a way of saying that, look, if you keep asking questions about Charlie Kirk and what happened to Charlie Kirk, they might hit the switch on a blackout. Okay, that's what it means right here. Maybe you were supposed to find this footage of Erica Kirk and it's supposed to be a threat in a way. But we've seen this exact move before, even in Iran, different language, same outcome. Silence right at the moment people start waking up. Okay, they'll hit the switch on you. I really do think if more people start waking up, really noticing patterns, start waking up to the DIC's agenda, they'll hit the switch. Comprehensive cyber attack, as Klaus Schwab says. It was basically a threat. But if this is all coordinated, okay, the destabilization of all these Western nations in order to speed through with this globalist agenda of total domination, who's helping normalize it and how does it get implemented domestically? Who are the shills and the puppets, people? Okay, because they all do work together. This is where the mask really slips here because Jimmy Kimmel, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this, he went on UK television and announces with a straight face that from a fascism perspective, he says, America is having a great year and that tyranny is booming, which is remarkable, considering he's saying this while sitting in a country where people are literally being arrested and imprisoned for social media posts. A country where speech is criminalized, jokes get you police visits, and opinions can land you in a cell. That takes a special level of disconnect or dishonesty, or both. And no, this isn't a Trump defense piece, but I don't buy the fairy tale that Trump is some savior of freedom at all. I think he represents a different flavor of control, one driven through surveillance, AI, militarization, and corporate state fusion instead of rainbow branding and language policing. Different suits, but they lead you to the same destination. But even with all that, pretending America is some fascist hellscape compared to the rest of the Western world is laughable. Americans still have a constitution, They still have codified free speech, they still have guns, and they still have a population that can openly criticize leadership, mock politicians, protest, and say things that would get you detained almost anywhere else in the so-called civilized world. This is where Kimmel exposes himself. He's warning the UK about American tyranny, okay? Tyranny is coming to the UK soon. While the UK is actively running a totalitarian system where they throw women in prison for texting their friends the word faggot, okay? Speech is punished while real violent crime is excused. Post the wrong meme, you get prison time, okay? I saw a report the other day, a little boy, 5-year-old boy, was reported for racism because he said he wanted to play with a white doll.
This is actually going on right across the country, where children either in nursery, so presumably aged between 3 and 4 years old, but also dozens who are aged under the age of 7 are being suspended or permanently excluded because they have quote-unquote homophobic or transphobic beliefs. 94 pupils have been suspended or permanently excluded for transphobia or homophobia in 2022 to 2023. I am going to talk to parents who saw the news story that landed over the weekend about this toddler incident and said, hang on a minute, this happened to us as well, and they now want to speak out about it. There's also an anecdotal incident that has come to my attention, someone raised it to me, involving race as well, where a young child who was about 4 years old at the time, who was white and blonde, was presented with a series of dolls that they were told to play with by their particular teacher. They were given a doll that was black, and they said, just as a child, oh, I want that one, which was white. They were then reported for racism, and their parents were brought into school to talk about it. And this is really what I want to drill down on. Not just the fact that this is happening right across the country, Martin, but also the fact that it has knock-on effects for parents. Because then they start asking questions about, well, where is the child getting this from? What kind of conversations are you having in the home? And before you know it, social services can be involved. Other parents at the school gate start talking about whether or not you're a racist or you're a transphobe, and you're passing these views on to children. For children saying things that are just genuine. For example, one child who was aged about 6 years old, who was a boy, saw that another boy in his class was turning up to school wearing a dress. And they pointed out, as a child might do, Martin, that was a bit different and that they didn't quite understand it. They were reported for not accepting that child's particular gender. The parents were hauled in. And what we're now seeing, as you'll hear later on in my show tonight, is a rise in homeschooling as well, because parents do not want their children to have this inflicted on them. It's a consequence of...
I can't believe what is happening in the UK. Imagine they get the parents in, look, we need to talk to you about your kid. Okay, your child is a racist. You're like, my 4-year-old child. Yes, your 4-year-old child is a racist. How? He wanted to play with a white doll. Is this where we're at, people? Absolutely absurd. And of course, you're going to make fun of a kid if he's a boy in a dress. Of course. You know, you're a kid. They think in black and white. This is where the UK is at, folks. It's over with. The UK is sounding like a real hellhole. I can't believe people are doing long prison bids for saying things that, is twisted into racism or transphobia. Anarcho-tyranny system over there. Speech is punished while real violent crime is excused. Post the wrong meme, you get prison time. Commit sexual assault, or worse, you walk free, depending on the skin tone. That's not theory, people. That's the reality of the country that Jimmy Kimmel warned about tyranny. Tyranny is coming to the UK if you guys don't pay attention. And let's stop pretending like Jimmy Kimmel is some neutral observer in all of this, okay? He loves to pretend he's anti-fascism, anti-tyranny, defender of freedom, right up until that tyranny shows up wearing a lab coat. When it was medical fascism, he was all in. He spent years using his platform to shame and ridicule anyone who questioned the death shot, trying his hardest to humiliate the anti-vaxxers. He did everything in his power to pressure people into compliance. He didn't just support mandates, he demanded them. No shots, no travel, no shots, no restaurant. You can't participate in society. He pushed all of that BS. He even said that people that don't get Trump's miracle shot, well, they should be denied access to hospital beds. Then he applauded Biden for tightening the screws even further. So when Jimmy Kimmel suddenly pretends to be a principled opponent of tyranny, yeah, spare me with the BS. He's against fascism only when it's rhetorically convenient. When it's state power forcing obedience, he's not a critic. He's just another commie with a hammer and sickle neck tattoo.
I honestly have no idea what's going on over there. I do know what's going on over here, though. And I can tell you that from a fascism perspective, this has been a really great year. Tyranny is booming over here. You may have read in your colorful newspapers, my country's president would like to shut me up because I don't adore him in the way he likes to be adored. The American government made a threat against me and the company I work for, and all of a sudden we're off the air. And because so many people spoke out, we came back. Our show came back stronger than ever. We won, the president lost, and now I'm back on the air every night. This is kind of unbelievable, but also par for the course. There's a controversy now. We now have controversies where we never had them before over the so-called vaccine passports that the Biden administration and private industry are working on so that we have a way to prove that you got your shots for the purposes of travel or going to a concert, sporting event, whatever. If you have a vaccine passport, you will be able to do that stuff. But unfortunately, many Republicans aren't on board with that, including Ron DeSantis, the terrible governor of Florida.
You want to go to a movie theater? Should you have to show that? No. You want to go to a game? No. You want to go to a theme park? No. So we're not supportive of that.
Right, which is very rich coming from the party that wants 9 forms of identification before you can vote. But
yeah, for illegals, this man is a total moron. He was supporting the vaccine passports, saying the unvaxxed should be denied hospital beds.
He was finally doing something to slow down the vaccine misinformation train. They are removing major anti-vaccine propagandists from the platform to prevent them from continuing to spread false information. Better 18 months late than never, I guess.
And here's the part that matters, okay? The argument was never that America is already the UK. The argument is that America is being pushed there, and people like Jimmy Kimmel are helping with that agenda. The UK isn't the warning, it's the destination for a lot of Western countries, almost every single one. And figures like Kimmel aren't exposing that trajectory, he's helping normalize it. They soften the audience first, then shame anyone who resists it. Always remember, this is a great litmus test. If they support vaccines, they are some lying ass puppets that want you enslaved. But get this, right after Kimmel drops that segment, saying the UK should watch out because, tyranny is booming in the States, guess what happens right after? Chaos erupts in Minneapolis. According to mainstream reporting, a federal immigration enforcement operation was underway when an ICE agent shot and killed a woman during an attempted arrest. And within hours, the country was right back in familiar territory, right? Sounds like George Floyd 2.0. considering it was 1 minute away from where the George Floyd event took place. Then protests, outrage, and the media is just constant here. I mean, the whole Twitter is only talking about this one thing. That's it. Now, here's the mainstream version of this. Renee Good, her last name's Good, okay? Yeah. Psy-Ops, right? 37 years old, was present during an ICE operation targeting another individual, and during the encounter, she ended up in her vehicle while agents were attempting to stop her. ICE claims the officer believed he was in immediate danger and fired his weapon. That's the official framing. What follows is where everything falls apart. Body cam footage is released, then reanalyzed, then slowed down, then frozen frame by frame. And somehow it convinces everyone of the exact opposite conclusions, depending on which side they were already on. What's honestly blowing my mind here is not even the shooting itself. It's about how instantly this story snapped the internet into two sealed realities that don't overlap at all. It's either black or white here. No matter what new footage comes out, no matter what clarification is offered, nobody moves an inch. Everyone walks away more convinced they were right from the very beginning. I had to stop reading Twitter entirely because my feed looked like psychological warfare, okay? Just wall-to-wall rage, absolute moral certainty, and people talking past one another like they're following two different scripts. When you slow the story down and lay out the background, it gets even messier. Renee Good had a history of activism and spent time in Canada after the 2024 election. Later returned to Minneapolis and was involved in immigrant rights organizing, including groups that monitor or interfere with ICE activity. She was enrolled through her child's school into activist networks that openly promote political engagement. None of that justifies what happened, but it is part of what led to the moment. At the same time, the officer involved had a prior traumatic incident involving a vehicle, which also raises many questions about training, judgment, and whether he should have been in this position at all. Watching the footage, it's also clear the situation was escalated on multiple fronts, okay? It's not like it's either one side or the other here. They were filming, taunting, and making fun of the ICE agents. Reckless decision-making layered on top of an already volatile situation. Two things can be true at the same time, okay? An officer can use excessive force, it could be wrong, and civilians can make choices that turn a bad situation into a deadly one. And the fact that saying that short circuits people's brains, that's the most disturbing part about this. Like, this was carefully designed to be this way. People don't seem interested in understanding what happened at all. They just want to join a side immediately. People are primed to be initiated into cults. And once they're locked in, no amount of new information will matter at all. Meanwhile, the symbolism behind this incident just piles up. Forget about the whole T-Rex in the background. What the hell was that? Yeah, that's pretty insane. The officer involved previously needed exactly 33 stitches from the last car attack he was in. And this shooting happens at 3333 Portland Avenue on the 3300 block at 33rd in Portland, where every address starts with 33? Coincidence? Freemasons be sprinkling that number on every psyop they manufacture. Then you zoom out further and the background noise gets louder, okay? This all unfolds right after Republicans expose this plot of fraud happening in all these Somali daycares where they're basically stealing billions of dollars from the government. And this happens also right after Republicans yank a $1 million earmark pushed by Ilhan Omar that was headed to a so-called substance abuse clinic operating out of a restaurant tied to people sharing the same residential address, part of a broader pattern of Somali fraud scandals in Minnesota that nobody seems eager to fully audit. At the same time, you've got thousands of activists in New York chanting, "Kill ICE now," and Kristi Noem will be hung. I mean, this is what they're chanting. This rhetoric that would have been unthinkable decades ago now just seems like the normal. Doesn't this seem like something major is going to happen here? So you end up with a dead woman, and 3 of her kids now don't have a mother, and apparently the father died a few years back, and this woman also has a wife? A panicked officer who should have been cleared for armed duty after his prior trauma, federal guidelines violated, activists celebrating, others demanding blood now. and a country instantly polarized into camps that won't even agree on basic facts. That's why this feels like a psyop here, not because one side is right or wrong, but because it produces exactly what the system feeds on. Outrage without resolution, empathy weaponized into chaos, law and order versus moral panic. And the real kicker is neither side seems to notice they're being marched toward the same destination. More incidents like this, more protests, more escalation, and suddenly the talk of emergency powers, the Insurrection Act and martial law doesn't sound extreme anymore. It sounds necessary. And how crazy is it that Trump was already preparing for this months back with his own reactionary forces, National Guards in all of these states, leftist states? It's almost like it was all planned. And that's the part nobody should be cheering, because once order gets rebuilt out of chaos, it never comes back looking like freedom. So no, the U.S. isn't already the U.K., but it's getting there. After this, it could be, okay? The next step here could be that. It's being driven towards a UK-style police state. And moments like this aren't random accidents. They're accelerants. Whether through incompetence, negligence, or design, they produce the same outcome every time: destabilization, polarization, absolute mayhem, which of course is justification for more control, because at the global level, this isn't about one country or one incident. This is coordinated instability from the UK to Australia and now escalating inside the United States. False flags, Psy-Ops, accelerated destruction. It's happening everywhere now. 2026 is looking like the year where things are really going to be accelerated here, okay? All used to fast forward populations into accepting systems they would have rejected outright just a few years ago. So when people say 2026 feels different, just a few days in and all of this is happening around the world, this is not a good sign. Different nations, perfectly tailored psyops to speed through with the agenda. So keep your tinfoil hats strapped on tight, people. Don't let the psyops win. See through them. Keep your head on a swivel, people. And that's where I'm going to leave it. If you like what I do here, links are in the description for ways to support. Without your support, this show does not carry on, so it is greatly appreciated you hit those links in the description of this video. Okay, from crypto wallets, my P.O. box, Subscribestar, Patreon, become a monthly subscriber. You will be helping fund this show. Organic coffee. Please purchase that coffee. You'll be helping this show as well. Until next week, folks, until next time, this is Steve Eyes. You're on the Eyes is Watching channel, signing off.